So this is the muscle introduction. Let me get my pen going. Now y'all know why we say that every time before a video starts. Because it won't let you do it until after you actually get started. Okay. So muscle introduction. So let's first talk, we always talk about why you even have something. So what are the functions of the muscles? The functions of the muscles are movement, okay? And it's either movement of bones or parts of, whole or parts of the body, okay? So you might just move your forearm, you might just move your finger, you might move your whole body, but you're moving something. Maintenance of posture. Okay, so when you're sitting here, you say, well, I'm not moving anything. You actually are. Those postural muscles are moving just a little bit to keep you erect, okay? So you are using your muscles to maintain your posture. They stabilize your joints, your elbow, your knee. Anywhere there's a joint, there's going to be a muscle attached to it to hold that joint in place. So you don't just have ligaments and tendons. You have muscles holding those joints in place. We get our body heat from muscles. So when muscles contract, they use energy, and the byproduct of that energy is heat. That's how we keep our core temperature. And it moves fluids. Blood in the blood vessels. Muscles will move urine. We have all muscles that move our food through our digestive tract. So anything that has to do with movement is the muscular system. Now, if you think back to Unit 1, we talked about 3 types of muscles. We had skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, and smooth muscle. Skeletal muscle moves bones. Okay, so that's generally what we're used to. When we talk about muscle, we tend to talk about skeletal muscle. If you eat steak, that's skeletal muscle. So most of the time what we recognize as muscle is skeletal muscle. We have heart muscle, cardiac muscle. It's only found in the heart. And then we have smooth muscle. And that's anywhere that there is a tube. So anywhere you have a tube, you have a smooth muscle. And I'm going to have some more examples of that. Now, again, this hopefully is review from Unit 1. Skeletal muscle attaches bones and skin. Okay? So think about, you think, really skin? But it does. When you smile, okay, that's those muscles moving, and it's attached to the skin, which gives you facial expression. So it does move skin. It moves bones. There's muscle attached to my forearm, my radius and ulna, which is causing those bones to move. It's striated. That means it has those little stripes. It's voluntary. You're in control of skeletal muscle. Very powerful. Able to generate a lot of force. Lots of force. And that's mostly what we're going to talk about in Unit 3. When we talk about muscle contraction, muscle physiology, we're basically going to talk about skeletal muscle. Cardiac muscle's only in the heart. It's also striped, but it's involuntary, so you're not in control of it. It's doing its own thing all the time without you having to think about it, which is really convenient. You don't have to go beat, beat, beat. It's doing it for you. And this is going to be a whole unit, basically, in 202. So we won't cover it a whole lot now, but you'll see it again, a lot more information about it in 202. And then smooth muscle. Anywhere you've got a hollow organ or a tube, like the stomach, the bladder, airways, blood vessels. Anywhere you have a hollow organ or tube, you have smooth muscle. It's not striped, not striated. Again, involuntary. You're not in control of it. It does its own thing. And we'll talk about it a little bit more, but again, you're going to see this again in 202, because in 202, you talk about the digestive system, you talk about the urinary system, and you talk about the respiratory system, and then you talk about the cardiovascular system. So smooth muscle will come up again in your 202 studies. Now, all muscle has basically 4 special characteristics. They're excitable, they contract, they extend or extensibility, and they're elastic or elasticity. When I use the word excitability, what I mean is it will respond to a stimuli. So you can stimulate it and it will do something. The stimulus that we're going to talk about is an action potential. That's the actual stimulus that causes a muscle to contract. And it's basically like an electrical shock. And so on Thursday, when we talk about resting membrane potentials, we're going to basically talk about how you generate an action potential. And this becomes very important for the rest of this semester for the muscle system and the nervous system and for 202. So if you want to look in your textbook and start learning about resting membrane potentials and action potentials, it's probably going to be the hardest thing you learn this semester. Okay? So you might want to go ahead and start looking toward looking at that, what that actually means. And we'll do it in class on Thursday. Contractility means it's the ability to shorten when it's stimulated. So if you think about a muscle, when a muscle contracts, it shortens. Muscles can also be stretched. They're extensible. They will stretch beyond their normal shape. They'll get a little bit longer. Think about when you're exercising and you want to stretch out a muscle, you can actually stretch them. But they will come back. They're elastic. They'll recoil. Another example of extensibility and elasticity, think about your esophagus. Okay? That's basically a tube of smooth muscle. So if you eat a big old bite of hamburger, it's this big, and chew it up, your esophagus will stretch, right? Allow for that food to pass, and then it'll go back to its original shape. So it'll stretch and then recoil to its original shape. Okay. For skeletal muscle, all skeletal muscle has one artery, one nerve, and one or more veins. So every muscle has an artery, so it has blood supply. That's bringing in oxygen, bringing in sugar, glucose. All right, it's got a nerve. That's so you can get a stimulus. It's got to be stimulated. And then it's got a vein to carry away carbon dioxide, waste products, etc. Now this is kind of a make you think question. I'm just going to see if you guys can come up with a reason why. There's one artery. Why is there more than one vein? You may have any you can't be wrong. Just why do you think there's more than one vein? Okay, arteries do what? They take blood where? From the heart to the organ, right? What do veins do? From the organ to the heart. All right. You always want blood returning to the heart any way that you can possibly get it. So that if you have two pathways, two veins bringing blood back to the heart, and one gets blocked, you've always got a way to get blood back. So there's always a redundancy. There's always an extra path to make sure you always get blood back to the heart. And you'll see that again when you talk about the cardiovascular system in Unit 2. There's a lot more veins than there are arteries. Okay, skeletal muscle is basically a group of fibers that are connected by connective tissue. And you have three types of connective tissue. And I'm going to show you a drawing here in just a second. You have the epimysium, the perimysium, and the endomysium. If you ever see the word myo or MYS, these both mean muscle. Okay? Just like osseous means bone, MYO or MYS means muscle. So it means it's somehow associated with a muscle. So the epimysium is upon or around the muscle. Okay? Peri also means around, but it's a smaller around, and I'll show you a picture. And then endo is the innermost layer. Let me show you the picture so you can get an idea. So which bone is this? Femur. This is the femur. All right. This is a muscle. Okay? And the muscle has to attach to the bone, otherwise the bone wouldn't move. You've got to attach it in some way. So you could either attach it via a tendon, which is basically a sheet of connective tissue that makes a tendon and connects it to the bone, or the connective tissue will actually bind directly to the bone. This outermost layer is called the epimysium. So when it makes a long rope-like sheet, it's called a tendon. And when it binds directly to the bone, it's actually binding with the periosteum. Do you remember that? The outermost layer of the bone, the periosteum? Whoops, that's a U. So the epimysium and the periosteum bind together to hold that muscle onto a bone. Now, a muscle is basically just a set of smaller units. Okay, so this whole thing is a muscle. Inside that muscle, you have these little divisions that are called fascicles. So this is a fascicle. This whole thing is a fascicle. The connective tissue around the fascicle is called the perimysium. So this tissue here around the fascicle is perimysium. Then you take a fascicle, and a fascicle is made up of muscle fibers. So this is a muscle fiber, that's a muscle fiber, that's a muscle fiber, that's a muscle fiber. And each muscle fiber is wrapped with an endomysium. Now, when you see the word muscle fiber, you can replace it with muscle cell. A muscle fiber is a muscle cell. So you have your muscle that's got a epimysium around it. Each muscle is a bundle of fascicles which have a perimysium around it, and each fascicle is filled with muscle cells which are surrounded by an endomysium. So just to review, when you attach a muscle to, or skeletal muscle, not smooth or cardiac, when you attach skeletal muscle to a bone, you either directly attach it, where your periosteum and epimysium will fuse, or indirectly, where you make a long rope-like tendon. And we'll do another one called aponeurosis in lab. You'll see that word show up again in lab. All right, we're going to do this again because this is very important on how you make a muscle. Because you've got to understand, when we talked about back in the very first day of anatomy, we said form follows function. You've got to understand the form of a muscle to know what it does, and so you can understand how it actually contracts. A muscle is the coolest thing about a muscle is you can actually see the inner workings of a muscle and see how it actually works. And so we're going to just keep talking about muscles all the way down to their microscopic and elemental levels on exactly how you make a muscle contract. Okay, so we're going to start with the big muscle, go all the way down to the component proteins that actually cause the muscle to contract. And you can actually see this using a scanning electron micrograph or microscope. You can actually watch a muscle contract and actually see the little proteins do their job and contract a muscle. So it's one of the few organs you can actually see how it really works. Pretty cool. So here's the muscle again. Epimysium around the muscle. We're going to pull out a fascicle. So here's the fascicle blown up, wrapped in a perimysium. Here's the muscle fiber. We're going to blow up the muscle fiber, or you can call it a muscle cell. And inside each muscle cell, you have myofibrils, or little muscle fibers. Muscle fibers, or the myofibrils. And these are actually what contract, okay? You have tons, hundreds of little myofibrils per muscle cell. It's like an organelle. And these muscle fibers are what contract, causing the muscle cell to contract. When that muscle cell contracts, the whole muscle contracts. And we're going to talk about how that works. Now, one thing I want you to notice, let me see. Let me go here. I'll go back. One thing I want you to notice, this is that muscle cell. This is the myofibril. These are nuclei, and these are mitochondria. Okay? You have nuclei and mitochondria. A muscle cell goes the entire length of a muscle. Okay? So if your muscle, say your biceps brachii, goes from here to here. So that's one big muscle, and you'll see it in lab. Each muscle cell goes the entire length of the muscle. So they're long cells. They're big cells. Think about the cells we've looked at in the lab. You have to look at a microscope, and they're teeny little things. This is a really big cell. Long, skinny cell. All right? But they have a lot of nuclei. They have more than one, and they have more than one mitochondria. Why do you think that is? They need more energy because what do muscles do? They do work. Okay, and to do work you have to have energy. So you have a lot of mitochondria to make that ATP, to make that energy. And you have a lot of nuclei. What do nuclei do? What's the nucleus do? What's it coding for? The DNA. And what's DNA code for? What specific organic molecule? What's meat made out of? Protein. I'll get there eventually. All right, so the nucleus has the DNA that codes for the protein, which is what a muscle is, right? So if you're doing work, you're actually tearing down muscle all the time. You need to keep it rebuilt, okay? You've got to rebuild more protein to keep this muscle, healthy. So if your cell is this long, okay, you don't want to have a nucleus down here and just be able to repair that part of the cell, do you? You need to have a nucleus basically spread out throughout the entire cell so that you can constantly have proteins being made so that you can repair and keep the muscle healthy. So you got a lot of nuclei. So see, this Unit 1 stuff's coming back. Okay? We're gonna keep talking about Unit 1. That stuff doesn't go away. Cell biology and chemistry, they just keep coming. So you can't forget about it. Okay, so a muscle fiber or muscle cell, they're round, they're cylinders. And they're about 30 centimeters long, the longest ones. Obviously, the ones in your fingers are not as long, but you've got some really long ones like in your thigh. Right down the middle of your back, you'd call it the back strap or the tenderloin if you were going to, look at a good piece of steak or a New York strip or something. But they have long ones along your back and on your quadriceps. They have a lot of nuclei. You make protein. A lot of mitochondria to make ATP, which is the fancy word for energy. And they also have glycosomes. Whenever you see the word some, that's basically a storage container. Okay, like lysosomes contain enzymes. Glycosomes contain glycogen. Do you guys remember what glycogen is? It's a sugar, okay? Basically, it's glucose. It's the way you store glucose. It's several glucoses put together make glycogen. You also have myoglobin. So that myo means what? Muscle. Where have you seen globin before? Hemoglobin. So myoglobin. What does hemoglobin store? What do you have hemoglobin? For what? To transport what through your body? Oxygen. Okay, so myoglobin does the same thing. It stores oxygen, okay, in your muscles. So, this is kind of cool. You have a lot of mitochondria. You have a lot of sugar in your muscles. You have a lot of oxygen in your muscles. Do you remember that thing called cellular respiration? What was cellular respiration? That's how you do what? How you make ATP. All right, it's going to come back. We're going to go back to cellular respiration again. All right, so you have to have a sugar source. You have to have an energy source, the sugar. You have to have oxygen in order to make ATP. Okay? Now, you want your muscles to be ready to go, right? If you want to walk, I don't want to go, I need to go get some sugar and I got to get some oxygen and then I get to walk. You want all that ready to go. So your muscles are storing sugar and oxygen so that at a moment's notice, you can generate that ATP and you can move. That's why if you've been running a long time or you've been, okay, let's pretend I'm just going to sit here, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it. And finally my muscle's going to do what? What word do you use when your muscle gives out? Fatigue. Your muscle is going to fatigue. It just can't do it anymore. That's because you've used up all that stored sugar and oxygen. Okay? It's used it up. Now you've got to get those stores built back up. That's why you can't run forever. You can't lift weights forever. Your muscles fatigue because you use up that stored sugar and that stored oxygen. Okay? It's ready to go until you overuse it. So you've got to build it back up. Your muscles also, these muscle cells, contain some different organelles, and we'll go into more detail about these organelles as we go along. All right. Let me skip that. We talked about the myofibrils. Those are those rod-like elements, and these are the actual contractile fibers. Contractile fibers. And they are 80% of the cell volume. So your muscle cells are mostly these contractile fibers. And these are what are actually striped. These myofibrils have the little stripes. And we're going to talk about what A bands and I bands are in just a second. So this is where you actually see the striping. So here's your muscle cell again. Here's your myofibril, and you can see these little striations. So these little striations, this is actually from here to here, is called a sarcomere. And when these shorten, when these lines come together, that myofibril shortens. If you shorten all of those together, the muscle cell shortens. If many muscle cells shorten, the whole muscle shortens. And we're going to talk about how that works. Now, one more thing about the muscle cell. I said you had an endomysium surrounding the cell. Underneath the endomysium, you have another layer called the sarcolemma. Anytime you see the word sarco, that also has to do with muscle. Okay, so sarco is another prefix that has to do or associates itself with muscle. So the sarcolemma is a membrane, and we'll talk about what it does here in a minute, that's underneath the endomysium. Okay, so each one of these little stripes, each one of these little divisions from here to here, that's a sarcomere. So there you go, that sarco again. Has to do with muscle. The sarcomere is the smallest contractile unit. It's the functional unit. It's what's actually shrinking or contracting to make a muscle contract. Okay? And there's some fancy words that we use with sarcomeres, A bands, I bands, H bands, M bands. Z disc, okay? That, when you're looking at a sarcomere, I'll show you a picture. Between the Z lines or the Z disc, that is the sarcomere. And I'm going to show you that in the next picture. Hang on just a second. Now, myofibrils are made up of two more types of proteins, thick and thin myofilaments. So you have myofibrils, which is basically muscle fiber. Now you have myofilaments, which are basically muscle filaments, and that just means they're smaller. So smaller parts inside the myofibril. Let me get my picture. Let me skip that. This is just in words. I'm going to show you on the actual picture. All right, so we've taken the muscle cell, okay, and we've pulled out a myofibril. Okay, so this is a myofibril. You'll see this myofibril has smaller myofilaments, the blue ones and the red ones. So the red are a type of myofilament, and the blue are a type of myofilament. Okay? This is your Z disc, and it's called a Z disc because it's kind of got this jagged look. Okay? So here's one here. Here's one here. So from here to here is an actual sarcomere. There'll be another Z disc here. So that's another sarcomere. There'll be another Z disc over here. That will be another sarcomere. Okay? I don't want you to worry about M lines, A bands, I bands, or H zones. I don't want you to know in that kind of detail. I want you to know that the Z discs to Z disc is the sarcomere. All right, now we're going to blow this up again. We're taking this sarcomere and we're blowing it up again. And we're going to actually see what those myofilaments actually are. Those myofilaments are composed of a thin one, the blue one, and a thick one, the red one. The thin filaments are known as actin. The thick filaments is myosin. So actin and myosin are what actually cause contraction. Myosin has these little heads on it. It's like little golf clubs. They will actually bind to to the actin, and when they contract, these two myosins, then they're like this, they will grab this actin and do like that. And bring that actin this way, that actin that way. You see they're attached to the Z discs. That then brings the Z disc in, and that causes that sarcomere to shorten. And that's actually where contraction occurs. And I've got those animations that I showed you that I've loaded to the Blackboard that actually shows you how that works. And we're gonna do those animations in class as well. All right, now we're going down even smaller. Like I said, we're going all the way down to the component parts of a muscle, all the way down to the very smallest unit you can look at. So here's your actin and your myosin. Actin's the blue, the thin filament. Myosin is the red or the thick filament. We're going to blow those up. So thick filament is your myosin. And basically, it's like you took a bunch of golf clubs and wrapped the handles all together, and the heads are sticking out. Okay? So this would be the golf club. The handle part's called the tail. The club part is called the head. You wrap them all together. So that's a myosin or thick filament. It's all these individual myosin molecules bundled up together. On the myosin molecule, this is one individual myosin molecule. You put them together, you get a thick filament. You have a place for ATP to bind. So without ATP, nothing happens. You've got to have energy to make this occur. So there's got to be a place for ATP to bind so the energy can cause this reaction. So there's where your ATP binds. Now on the thin filament, it's your actin. Your thin filament actually is composed of 3 different proteins. Myosin is a protein, by the way. And actin, troponin, and tropomyosin. Actin are the little blue things, okay? And it's almost like pearls on a string. The tropomyosin is the string, okay? Actin is connected to the string like pearls, like a double pearl necklace. And then troponin is interspersed inside that double-stranded necklace. On each actin, there is a place for myosin to bind. So this little circle here, that's the myosin attachment place. So what happens is ATP comes in, binds to the myosin, which activates it, gets it ready to actually move, and that myosin will then bind to that actin, and those actin filaments will come closer together. All right, one more thing. You have what's called the sarcoplasmic reticulum. This is an organelle. And we're going to go into a whole lot of detail. You're going to understand how this works by the time we get through Unit 3, I promise. All right, sarcoplasmic reticulum. Does that remind you of anything? The endoplasmic reticulum. This is just a fancy word for endoplasmic reticulum. It's what you find in a muscle cell. It's called these because you got that word sarco again. So the endoplasmic reticulum of a myofibril, okay, is called a sarcoplasmic reticulum. And what I want you to remember, this is where you store calcium, okay? It's a storage calcium place. Remember we talked about why you need calcium? It has a role in muscle contraction, and you've got to store it somewhere, and it's stored inside the sarcoplasmic reticulum. All right, let's see. We're gonna come back to that on Thursday. In order for, let's see where this is what I thought. Sorry, guys. Wow, wait a minute. In order for a muscle to contract, you've got to have 2 steps. Okay, and this is what we're going to talk about. This is going to bring me into what I'm going to talk about on Thursday. You've got to have activation, and you've got to have excitation, contraction, coupling. So this is what we're going to talk about on Thursday. So if you want to watch those videos ahead of time, the little short AP flicks, hopefully that'll help you be ready for my Thursday talk. Activation, that's the stimulus. Okay, that's the electrical stimulus. I can't spell. Electrical stimulus from a nerve. So a nerve has to send a signal to a muscle to activate it. Okay? That's electrical. Then you've got to turn that electrical signal into a mechanical event. And that's the actual contraction. So we're going to talk about how you turn an electrical event into a mechanical event. And it's pretty complex, and it's going to take us a couple of days to get through it, but we'll start that on Thursday. Now, one more thing I want to do before you guys leave is I want to talk about how you name these muscles. Because when you guys come into lab next week, we're going to talk about muscles, and you've got some worksheets to work on between now and then. Hang on.